And it's going to get ugly for Israel. It's going to get ugly for Israel. Remember, Donald Trump was resistant against releasing all these Epstein files. He was saying, okay, can we stop talking about it, guys? It's getting old, stop, blah, blah, blah. And then what did that cause? It caused huge public outrage against Donald Trump. You had all these MAGA conservatives, all these MAGA Republicans saying, hey, Trump, we voted for you so that you could go against the elites and clean the swamp and drain the swamp and all this stuff. What the hell are you doing? What's wrong with you? And eventually, the Trump administration released all these millions of files. And like I said, anyone who has been focusing on the Epstein story knows that the Epstein story is intensifying anti-Israel sentiment. So by Trump or by his administration releasing the files, Trump knows damn well that he is putting more fuel on the fire against Israel. He knows this. Anyone with a half a working brain cell knows that when you release the Epstein files, it's going to intensify anti-Israel sentiment. Why do you think Ben Shapiro and Mark Levine and Josh Hammer and the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL, why do you think all these guys are scared shitless of the Epstein story? They're all scared shitless. I wouldn't be surprised to see one day Ben Shapiro saying he's leaving Miami. He's going to go to Tel Aviv. I wouldn't be surprised to see one day Dave Rubin, Josh, all the rest of these bastards, all the rest of these members of the temple, taking flights to Israel and saying, the anti-Semitism is getting too much here. We got to go, guys. I don't feel safe here. They're leaving England. Look at what happened in Great Britain recently. Record numbers of Israelis, dare I say the J word? Record numbers of them leaving the UK. Why? Why are they leaving the UK for? Because the anti-Israel sentiment continues to grow. And look at what happened in the UK recently. The guy who Keir Starmer appointed to be the British ambassador to the United States has been exposed as someone who was tied to Epstein. Mr. Mendelsohn, who is tied to Keir Starmer's government, was tied to Epstein. And now there's this huge scandal in the UK over this because it turns out that Keir Starmer knew that Mr. Mendelsohn was tied to Epstein. And apparently, it didn't really disturb him enough. Apparently, it did not bother him enough to the point where he appointed this guy to be the British ambassador to the United States. So now you have this huge outrage in the United Kingdom. Anti-Israel sentiment has skyrocketed in the United Kingdom. And you can say, well, it's because of the Muslims. Yeah, the Muslims play a big role in that. But the white people in England are also not the biggest fans of Israel. And a lot of the white folks in the United Kingdom, in the UK, are now starting to turn against Israel because now they're starting to think about, undue influence on the UK, on all politicians, mate. So go look into it. Record numbers of members of the temple fleeing the UK. They're going off to, Israel, wherever. So why is Ben Shapiro, Levine, Hammer, Greenblatt, why are all these guys scared shitless? Why? Why does Ben Shapiro continue to insist that we should not care about this Epstein story? Same thing with Mark Levine. Why? Because they know damn well. They know damn well that all of the attention on Epstein spells massive negative attention on Israel. That's the reason why this whole thing is about Israel. That's what this is about. It's not just about, there was a scandal and there were some crimes that were done. That's not the only thing. That's not the only reason why people are focusing on this. Yes, they're focusing on the crimes. Yes, they're focusing on the evils, as they should, as we all should, absolutely. But it's not just that. It's the fact that people are thinking the politicians who we vote for are controlled by a foreign government, and therefore we do not have sovereignty. Therefore, we are being ruled by a bunch of foreign elitist pedophile pimps. That's what this is about. Our politicians are being controlled and blackmailed by a pimp from Israel. And this, or he's not really from Israel, but he's a pimp tied to Israel, a Jewish pimp. All right, I'm just going to say it. He was a Jewish pimp. So our country is controlled by a Jewish pimp. People are wondering, is Trump compromised by a Jewish pimp? People are wondering, in the UK, is Mr. Mendelsohn, who is a member of Keir Starmer's government, being controlled by a Jewish pimp? How many of our politicians were under the control of a Jewish pimp? I'm telling you what this is about. Don't you guys? Oh my God! See, all these people doubting me. All these people saying, "Oh, the Zionist establishment is never going to go down." All you people doubting me. Don't you guys read history? Are you guys this ahistorical? This has happened. You guys realize this has happened before, right? You guys realize this. This is like we're just in the cycle here. You know, history does not run in a linear fashion. History doesn't run as a singular line. History runs in a circle. And the reason why history runs in a circle is because history doesn't really repeat itself. Human beings repeat themselves. And so if you go back into the past, you will find this cycle. Western countries will accept, this is a fact of history. I'm not saying this is a good thing, so don't fucking damn me for this, YouTube. But Western countries will accept members of the temple. If you don't know what a member of the temple is, it's the J word. If you don't know what the J word is, then look at a map and look for a country that starts with an I and ends with an L. Then you'll know what I'm talking about. Western countries accept members of the temple. Then they, for whatever reason, they begin to despise members of the temple. We have seen this cyclically. We have seen this go in cycles in human history. We saw this in Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Spain, France, England. And so America right now is going through that cycle. That's what's happening. America is going through the cycle. I'm not saying it's a great thing. I don't like it. I don't like people going against other people based on their demographic. But this is just a fact of history. And one of the laws of history is that history rhymes. It roughly repeats itself. That's why we say it rhymes, as opposed to just saying it repeats itself. But roughly speaking, more or less, history rhymes. And so right now, America is going through the very same cycle that a lot of other countries went through in history. America was hardcore Zionistic after World War II. So America embraced Israel, embraced the Israelis, was hardcore pro-Israel, accepted them with open arms, the whole thing. So it's been decades. We've been going through this for decades, right? We are now at a point in which we are decades after this conditioning began. And so because we have been conditioned to this for decades, it's going to take some time. But what we are witnessing is the transition point. That's what we are currently witnessing. It's the transition point. And now we're seeing the shift. And it's going to get worse. And the whole Epstein story is going to make things worse for Israel. Mark Levine, Ben Shapiro, Jonathan Greenblatt, Josh Amber. That's why they're all telling you to stop focusing on Epstein, guys. Why are you guys so obsessed over this? Why are you guys so obsessed over this? Now, they wanted you to be obsessed with the grooming gang scandal in the UK. They had no issue. They had no issue, not one whatsoever, with people fixated on the UK grooming gangs scandal. How you had all these Pakistani gangs sexually grooming young girls in the UK, and you had British officials who knew what was happening, but they didn't really press the issue as much as they should have because they were afraid that it would spark racism in the country. Then the scandal broke out, and all it has done is increased more racism in the United Kingdom. Now, we could talk about that story until we're blue in the face. Ben Shapiro's not going to care. In fact, he wants you to focus more on that because that means you're not focusing on Epstein. He would much rather have you focus on that than on Epstein. He doesn't care. We have the whole Somalian daycare center scandal. We could talk about that until we're blue in the face. Ben Shapiro's not going to care. Josh Hammer's not going to care. None of these Zios are going to care. Why is it that they're so worried, that they're so concerned about the Goyim focusing on the Jeffrey Epstein story? Even though the Jeffrey Epstein story is extremely scandalous, because now Israel is going to be complaining about Iran. They're going to say, oh my God, Iran's going to kill us. They're going to say Turkey's going to destroy us. You got to help us. And the American people are saying, what? We don't care, because you guys are the country of Jeffrey Epstein, because it ties with Israel. That's the only reason why. Because the more people know about Epstein, guess what's going to happen? The more people are going to go down this rabbit hole on the internet, reading about conspiracies, about pedophile rings, and they're going to read about, I don't know, babies being eaten alive by politicians. They're going to read about, I don't know, they're going to read some story claiming that Leon Panetta ate infants and Hillary Clinton had satanic orgies and Bill Clinton cannibalized a prostitute in front of a statue of Bab Homet. People are going to, and there's a lot of stuff like this on the internet. I'm not even making this up. There's a whole lot of stuff like this on the internet. And people are going to go down that rabbit hole. And they're going to read stuff that's not true. They're also going to read stuff that is true. What worries them, what worries the Zionist establishment is the perception. The perception that is going to get amplified because of this is Israel is evil, and therefore America should not support Israel. America needs to cut ties off from Israel. That's going to be the perception. That's a dominating perception, but it's going to continue to dominate. And the Epstein story is going to help it continue to dominate. It's going to amplify this whole thing even more. And that's why Ben Shapiro and his ilk are so worried about this. Because the Epstein story getting global attention means negative attention being placed on Israel on a massive scale. This whole thing with Jeffrey Epstein is going to be another nail on Israel's coffin. Just as the Gaza slaughterhouse led to the majority of Democrats turning against Israel, this Epstein story is going to lead to more and more Republicans, if not the majority of Republicans, going against Israel. In fact, if you look at Republicans under the age of 50, the majority of those people already hate Israel. And so this Epstein story is really going to be another ignited match thrown into the gasoline wherein Israel is currently soaking. Everyone knew this. Everyone who is focusing on this whole Epstein situation knows that this story, this whole giant quagmire, is leading to more and more hatred against Israel. Because what do you have in this story? What do you have at the end of the day? Let's be real here. You got a Jewish pimp pimping out girls, pimping out underage girls, blackmailing politicians. He's got very deep ties to the elites of Israel, such as Ehud Barak, who's a former prime minister of Israel. And he was heavily tied to which country? Israel. So at the end of the day, what you have in this whole story is this ginormous scandal being tied to Israel. And the denouement, the outcome of this scandal is going to be Americans and, of course, other Westerners saying, this is why we need to cut off ties with Israel. This is why we need to abandon Israel. This is why Israel is evil. This is yet another reason why Israel is evil. This is another reason why Israel is antichrist. This is another reason why we need to throw Israel under the bus and leave Israel to the sharks. Really, by sharks, we're talking Turkey and Iran, the two biggest existential threats to Israel. And so the whole Epstein, see, I'm not just focusing on the story of Epstein itself, unto itself. I'm not just focusing on what crimes Epstein did. I'm not just focusing on the politicians that he was tied to. I'm really focusing on the big picture, the overall picture. I'm not just focusing on some of the trees. I'm trying my best here to focus on the forest. And what do we see in the bigger picture? What do we see in the situation in terms of the grand scheme of things? What we see is another nail being hammered into Israel's coffin. I find it very interesting that Donald Trump has been praised as the most pro-Israel president in all of America's history. This is what Zionists have been saying. This is what Jewish people have been saying. This is what Israelis have been saying. The Israeli government has been saying this. But yet, it's the Trump administration that releases millions of Epstein files. It's the Donald Trump administration that creates this Epstein library. That's what it's called, by the way. Go look it up. Go look it up. The Epstein library. It's in the official website for the U.S. government. And you can go on to, it's a database. It's practically a search engine. You want to see if someone may be tied to Epstein? Just go to the Epstein library and type in a word, type in a name, and see if that person is somehow connected to Jeffrey Epstein. And this database was created under Trump's watch. The files were dumped under Trump's watch. You're going to say, well, they're not releasing all of the files. Okay, fine. I have no doubt about that. Are they omitting things? Absolutely. Are they redacting things? Absolutely. But still, they have released enough information for people to see quite concretely that Jeffrey Epstein had serious ties to the Mossad, to the Israeli government, to people like Ehud Barak. And like I said, anyone who is focused on this story knows the ramifications of this, knows the ripple effect that this is causing. And that ripple effect is a massive shift against, not for, against Israel. Now, the world has already shifted against Israel to a great extent because of the slaughterhouse in Gaza. But there is another aspect, there is another side in this coin, and that is the Israel lobby and the Mossad, and how Israel and its acolytes have undue influence on America's politicians and also on the politicians of other Western countries like Germany and Great Britain. The Epstein files and the whole Epstein story sheds more light on this reality, how this Jewish pimp had so much influence, how this Jewish pimp was getting requests from politicians and other agents, other actors within certain governments, and how Epstein was really influencing politicians and blackmailing politicians in his criminal underground. And so this sheds more light on the phenomenon of Israel having this undue influence on America's politicians. And so you have really two sides of the coin. You have two sides of the anti-Israel coin, so to speak. One side is Israel's crimes. The butchering of the Palestinians, the sexual abuse of Palestinian detainees, the persecution of Christians by the Israeli government, the persecution of Christians by Jewish fanatics, settlers, etc. That's one side. And this is a major reason as to why people are turning against Israel. This is the number one reason why the majority of Democrats are now against Israel. And this is a major reason as to why a substantial amount of Republicans, especially Republicans under the age of 50, have gone against Israel. But the other side of the coin is the Israel lobby and Israel's influence on the American government. That's another side of this whole coin. And so with the slaughterhouse of Gaza, Israel lost the Democrats. But still, as bad as Gaza is, and as horrific as Israel's crimes are against the Palestinians, sadly enough, it is still not horrendous enough for the Republicans, for the majority of Republicans, to abandon Israel. Because the majority of Republicans, regardless of the fact that a substantial portion of the Republicans have gone against Israel, still a majority of Republicans are pro-Israel. When you include the boomers, who are still a big part of the Republican Party. Now, if you look at Republicans under the age of 50, then it's a totally different story. But still, overall, the majority of Republicans are disturbingly enough not disgusted by what Israel has done to Gaza and what Israel continues to do to Gaza. So how do you make a even bigger shift within the American right wing against Israel? How do you do that? Bring in undue foreign influence on America's politicians. Because when it comes to Republican anger, what gets Republicans angry more than anything is foreign influence on politicians. This is why Republicans focus more on the Somalian daycare scandal than Democrats do. Because in that story, it's a foreign demographic stealing taxpayer money from the government of Minnesota, right? So we're talking about foreigners stealing the white man's money, so to speak, or stealing the American man's money. Hard-earned tax dollars being robbed by a bunch of foreigners, a bunch of lazy foreigners who didn't earn it. That's what pisses off Republicans, as opposed to Democrats. Democrats get more angered by injustice to a weaker population or a poorer population. This is just an observation, right? This is just an observation of reality here. So if you tell Republicans, no, there are foreigners who have undue influence on your politicians, and they're blackmailing your politicians. Really? Which foreigners are doing this? Which ones are doing this? The Israelis. That causes a shift against Israel. And we have been seeing this massive shift against Israel happening in the Republican faction really since 2018. It's been going on before Gaza. This has been going on since 2018. What was happening in 2018 was more and more American evangelicals began to reject dispensationalism and Christian Zionism. So there was a cultural shift that began in 2018. It got amplified in 2024, 2025 with the Gaza slaughterhouse, and with more and more younger Republicans becoming aware of the Israel lobby. So the Jeffrey Epstein story has become a further nail on Israel's coffin. Now the Jeffrey Epstein story sheds more light on the reality of Israeli, really, put in parentheses, foreign influence on America's politicians. So the ripple effect of the Jeffrey Epstein dump, the dumping of the Jeffrey Epstein files, is going to be a further ripple effect or a further tidal wave against Israel. Not just from the Democrats, but from the Republicans. Because the Jeffrey Epstein story is something that it's focused upon by Democrats, yes, but this is something that conservatives and American right-wingers tend to focus more on as opposed to Democrats. So with the Jeffrey Epstein story, and with this story of this Jewish pimp pimping underage girls, blackmailing politicians, having all of this undue influence on America's politicians, you're going to see now an even deeper rift between the American right and the American Zionist establishment. It's going to get worse for them. A lot of you guys are saying, oh, no, Israel's never going to go down. The Israeli establishment is never going to go down. The Zionist establishment is never going to go down. It is going to go down. The reason why a lot of people don't see what I'm seeing is because, you see, you guys, I'm not saying you guys as in every single one of you, but in those who doubt me, in my detractors, to use that term, which has become kind of popular recently, to my detractors, the reason why you guys are doubting me is because you guys are accustomed to America being pro-Israel. You guys are accustomed to America being Zionistic. That's what we have been accustomed to. I can't blame you guys because, listen, I'm the first one to say it. I have been accustomed to be pro-Israel. Absolutely. I was raised from a very young age to be pro-Israel. My father was one of the most... Oh, my God. Guys, this is coming from the mouth, meaning my mouth. This is coming from the mouth of someone who was raised by one of the biggest faces in American Zionism. My father was one of the biggest personalities, one of the biggest figureheads in the American Zionist movement. So if you guys were raised to be pro-Israel in Sunday school, I was raised to be pro-Israel 10 times more hardcore than you guys were. I guarantee it. Maybe your parents mentioned Israel in passing. Maybe your parents said, you got to support them. You got to bless Israel because, that's what God wants. And then you went off on your own way, right? But I was raised by one of the biggest figureheads in Zionism. I grew up around Zionists. I would eat dinner with Zionists. I would hang out with Israelis on a weekly basis. I would go to big pro-Israel events with my father. I would go to the big Zionistic conferences. I would go to all of these events. I went to all of these events. If you guys were raised to be pro-Israel by your Sunday school teacher or by your parents, and that's what you were conditioned to be, I was raised to be Zionistic in a way that was 10 times more hardcore than you guys were. I guarantee. I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm not trying to one-up anyone. It's just the reality. And so this is coming from someone who comes from that background. If anyone should be doubting that there's going to be this downfall of the pro-Israel establishment, it should be me. When a society has been accustomed to a certain way of thinking, it's difficult for that society to think that what they were accustomed to is going to end. It's difficult for that society to believe that what they were accustomed to support is going to face its downfall. I'm not talking about something that's going to happen a year from now. I'm not saying this is going to happen 5 years from now. I'm looking into maybe 10 years from now, maybe 15, maybe 20 years from now, what we can expect. I'm not saying this is going to happen next year. I'm not going to say this is going to happen in the next 2 years. It may happen in the next maybe 8 years, maybe 10, maybe, like I said, 15, 20 years. I'm looking at the long term here. I'm not looking at the immediate future. But what I am seeing in the trends, what I am seeing in the political discourse of American society, on the Democratic side and on the Republican side, is a massive shift against Israel. A massive alteration of the political zeitgeist in regards to the Jewish state. For the Democrats, that shift happened with the Gaza slaughterhouse. To some extent, the butchering of the Palestinians got a lot of Republicans, mainly young Republicans, millennial Republicans, and Zoomer Republicans to shift against Israel. But like I said, the general Republican population is pro-Israel still. So how are the Republicans going to shift even more against Israel? This is where the phenomenon of foreign influence comes in. This is where pointing out foreign influence by Israel's agents comes into play. And this is where people like Tucker Carlson and Mr. Massey come into play. So you have Thomas Massey, who is very popular amongst conservatives. And what is one of his selling points? What's his biggest selling point? Really? His biggest selling point is, I don't receive a dime from AIPAC. Republicans love it. Why do people love Tucker Carlson? Because Tucker Carlson goes against the Israel lobby. And you see this also on the Democrat side, where you have politicians like Ocasio-Cortez saying, I got $0 from AIPAC. This is a selling point. The Gaza slaughterhouse is something that mainly got Democrats to go against Israel. But the Epstein story and the anti-AIPAC sentiment and the anti-Israel lobby sentiment that is rising up is something that can unite Republicans and Democrats even more so. And it can get more Republicans to go against Israel. So I'm looking at the implications. I'm looking at the ripple effect. I'm looking at the consequences of this whole quagmire, this whole Epstein situation. And the ripple effect is and is going to be more and more people going against Israel. More and more people saying, we've had enough of the chosen ones ruling the American government. They are shaking it in our face while saying, yes, it's true. But what are you going to do about it? You're correct, Jody. You're absolutely right. And this is only going to further prove what I'm foretelling here. And that is the hatred against Israel is going to become even more ferocious.